Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mama Genius Hub podcast. Are you struggling making some connections with your family, with your kids? Any of that sound familiar to you? Well, I got Britt here to help us solve some of that, think about that, redirect that, and so we can be in community and abundance with everyone. So we'll get right into that right now. Welcome to Mama Genius Hub podcast, where we support moms with big dreams, from entrepreneurship to personal aspirations. I'm your host, Michelle DeKaiser, and I'm here to help you unlock your potential in all areas of life. Join us as we explore strategies for thriving in motherhood while pursuing the dreams, the key to actually unlocking your genius. Subscribe now and embark on a journey to realize your fullest potential. And I'm so excited to bring up Britt Sandoval is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, authentic living coach, and master student in human relations, specializing in inclusive leadership. They teach audience how to foster inclusion and abundance using the 4A framework, which we'll dive into: awareness, acceptance, alignment, and authenticity. As a non-binary parent, entrepreneur, and advocate, Britt brings a unique perspective to leadership, parenting, and team building, blending the live experiences with actionable insights. Their work inspires individuals and organizations to create environments where authenticity and intentionality drive meaningful connection and growth. Oh, Britt, I'm so excited to bring you to the stage and talk about connection, my favorite thing.
Hi, how are you? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so great. I'm so thank you so much for joining us today. And as I like to just dive right in, what is your why behind wanting to talk about authenticity, connection, all of that?
Yeah, honestly, having to navigate and coming back from not having any of that in my life, I lived a very out of my authenticity for a long time to try and, prove my worth as a mom and as a spouse and all of these things. And I lost myself in all of it. And it wasn't until I was in a very deep depression and going through a lot of difficult things where you kind of have to get to that bottom where you start to figure and claw your way out. Exactly. And now that I'm kind of on the other side of that and able to live in my authenticity, and even though there's been a lot of changes and loss and grief and things and all of that, just how much a better parent and connected person and parent I am living on this side of things. I want to help others to be able to find that same authenticity and abundance in living in their true self.
Oh, I love that so much. I love how you put that together, because it's so true. When we're living as something else, like there's always something eating away at us, and we can't quite pinpoint it until we start to like do the deep work to figure out what is that authentic self. And so where did you start with doing that in your journey?
Honestly, for me, it was during COVID. I was actually reading your bio that was kind of, I think for a lot of people on a lot of podcasts I've been on, the COVID experience and the force in making us turn inward and secluding us from our groups and our identities that we had made ourselves so intertwined in, to then, actually have to sit with yourself and evaluate where you are in your life. And for me, that was a really big turning point in kind of determining and figuring out who I truly was and in what ways I wasn't living in alignment with myself and what I wanted in my life. And that was really kind of it for me.
I love that so much, because I feel like COVID was twofold. Like people either went inwards and really discovered something about it, or people just came out angry and
Yeah.
and kind of just some of the things that happened is like it kind of showed people's true colors, to who they like kind of dug down to get into who they were. And I had some results where it was just like all of a sudden you're like, well, if you have COVID, stay away from me. But if I have COVID, I'm still coming to the family reunion. I'm telling everyone that I have COVID and I'm still there, but don't come anywhere near me if you have it. And just those kind of things of like just mentality and like mask, no mask. And it wasn't even that. It was just the disrespect to people's decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really drives a wedge between people.
Yeah. And I think for me too, it was the first time that I was able to recognize the dehumanization that had kind of occurred, and the how so many people were so like advocating for the lives of everyone, but as an immunocompromised individual, I have lupus. how quickly to me it became apparent that not everybody had the same value in my life as an immunocompromised person versus, a healthy individual. And that for me was one of the first moments where I really started to realize how dehumanized and cut off from my own experiences I had been. And that was really the time when I started then being able to kind of evaluate my internal self and where I was at, as you're kind of seeing the mirror of how people are behaving around you. And it was really fascinating, honestly.
I love how you put the word mirror in there, because it's so true. When we just start to look at, especially if we use the word mirror with our own triggers, we start to see what is that mirror? Why is that person triggering us? But especially when the whole world was put in almost the same situation, what comes out of it? And I love speaking to people who use that time to go inward and to find something new from it. Because I really think those of us, and whether you did it then or choose to do it now, I mean, I really think that's the first starting point: is who am I and how do I emerge and show that to the world? And kind of get back to that word of dehumanization, because it's so important that we all of a sudden, it's so easy to say them and us when we take humanity away from each other. And I always like to look at it, especially when we're talking about community and communication, it's really about, what is their experience? What are they going through at this moment in time? Can I fully listen to them, especially when we're talking about our kids, and talking about that relationship with them, and how can I give them my full undivided attention and actually try to understand what they're saying, not try to fix it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and that was really, for me, switching to virtual schooling programs and all of that too, it changed my whole parenting dynamic. And then once you start to humanize your own experiences, you kind of start to see, okay, the ways that I was taught to parent, or kind of shown what parenting was supposed to be like growing up, wasn't really humanizing my children and humanizing their experience and making sure that and understanding that the connections that I'm showing them and my connection to myself is literally setting them up and showing them how to do that with themselves. And so it was interesting how, even in just those transition periods, that once you start to be able to connect with yourself and understand your experience, it really starts to open up your ability to see others' experiences. And that's really hard for a lot of people, because either the discomfort in understanding that you have been dehumanizing another human being makes you shudder away from any further growth, or you kind of have to learn how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and be accountable for, what, I didn't humanize their experience. And then how to navigate adding that into your parenting and seeing how there are going to be instances that come up that still trigger you to where you respond in a dehumanizing way. And so that's where I kind of came up with my 4A's, where I started to check myself.
Well, I want to get to your 4A's in just a moment, but we'll be right back. Attention mompreneurs. Do you feel like you're constantly juggling the responsibilities without a moment to yourself? It's time to pause and reflect with our Mama Genius quiz. Tailored for busy mamas like you, this quiz will help you identify what's blocking your path and inspire you to harness your unique strengths. Transform how you manage life and business, find your rhythm, and ignite your joy. Visit mamageniushub.com today to discover your Mama Genius. Again, that's mamageniushub.com. Yeah, and that was exactly what I want to dive straight into right now, is the practicality and really talk about your 4A's. So let's first of all just list them out and then go ahead and start to dive into them, and we'll try to take one at a time.
Yeah. So my 4A's are what I keep in touch with and remind myself as a framework of running down my emotions. So my 4A's are awareness, acceptance, alignment, and authenticity. And they're something that I teach for people to do as an inward exercise. This isn't meant to therapize other people or be how aware are other people. It's really meant to be in the I in inclusion, and in that framework of figuring out that if you are not able to live by these ways, you're not going to be able to connect with other people in that way.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your inward activity or what were you referring to?
Yeah. So whenever I'm having when I'm feeling like a big visceral emotion or response to literally anything in my life, I'll kind of run down these 4 A's. So awareness is being able to actually hear and name and address the emotions that are coming up, being aware of that they're there. Um, Acceptance is taking it one step further and maybe understanding how or why those things are kind of presenting themselves in this emotion. And then you kind of move to alignment, like, okay, I see these feelings. I accept that they're there, they're valid, and they're okay. But in my reaction, am I going to react in alignment where I am able to then reflect my values and my integrity and my consistency that I am very consistent about trying to, model for my children and the people around me? Or am I going to act out of unalignment where then I allow my emotional response to kind of take over, and kind of it changes the way you behave, and only then, once I can kind of get through ensuring that I've seen what's coming up for me, I validate it and that it's real, I choose to act in alignment. And that's when you then really unlock authenticity, which really leads to that honesty and openness, and creates that safe space for your children to then kind of go through their own individual, why are they feeling the way that they're doing? It's okay to feel those ways, but how are we going to align our behavior? And it just allows for a foundational path of ensuring that we validate all the parts of us and we accept all those parts of us. But ultimately, we still are in control in how we behave. And when we can be open and validate all those parts of us, then we are able to really embrace our true, honest selves, and create a safe and secure space for the people around us.
I love that so much. And actually, I have to share this story with you. Actually, yesterday on the podcast, I had someone who specializes in EFT, and she was going through when you have the big emotions to like go through the EFT movements and everything. So my daughter came home from school, we're off the bus, and you could just tell she was already angry and she had to get ready for a swim. And so then she just starts, I was like, it's leftover night. And the yells come out like, I hate leftovers. I don't want to look at it or anything, right? So somehow we end up over by the couch area. And so she's still yelling at me. I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to practice what I heard today, right? And I start doing the EFT and I start saying, I'm feeling frustrated. I go start tapping through it. And she asked me in her mean voice to stop, that I was annoying her. And so I was just trying to ignore her completely altogether and just stay in my own body and not let her really do that. Next thing I know, I have a pillow smashed in my face. Like she whacked me in the face to stop me.
Oh my gosh.
And so then the reaction comes out and I yell at her to get to her room. And then I kind of told my husband, because he's the one taking her swim, and I called him. He was still on his way home. I go back up to talk to her. I think by that point, usually she actually does get kind of like realizes what had happened. So, oh no, she was hiding, and she was just so angry. And so anyways, she'll probably hate me for even telling this story, but it didn't go very well. And so she was mad about dinner. So instead, I just walked away. I let my husband come in and kind of deal with it. And so what I did in the background was I just went and made her something that she could take in the car that she would actually eat. And so as she's like upstairs, I can't go to swim. Mom said I couldn't eat dinner, blah, blah, blah. I just walk upstairs with the container and head it to her. She's like, thank you, Mom. And just in those situations. And then I didn't actually see her after that point, because by the time I came home from where I was actually playing pickleball last night. She was asleep. This morning I was making breakfast for the other ones when she got up, and she just walks over and gives me a huge hug. And then we went and talked about, later on, I asked her, I was like, I'm not asking you to do EFT, but I want you to understand what it is so that you can appreciate and value that I might need to do that. And that's something that you shouldn't take away from me. I need to do that in that moment. I know you didn't like hearing what I was saying, but part of it is getting our voice out there and doing that. And so I was trying to explain to her, like, you don't have to do it, but please respect my decision to want to do it. Even if it's in front of you, you can leave, whatever. But in that moment, that was something I needed to do. And I just love what you're saying right there when you go through the 4 steps as well as another directive, because if some of the people that listen, EFT didn't quite fit them, going through these 4 steps is kind of in that same way, like getting us to that point of how do we respond instead of react to our kids in a way that is authentic to us? And like you said, we still have control over those behaviors.
Yeah. Well, too, and I think, in those moments, it's such an easy, sorry, my cat just jumped from, it was really loud. But, it gives you kind of just a basic framework. So like, even when you are coming back to those conversations with your kids, and you're kind of working through why was what I was doing so triggering to you? And figuring out what was that bringing up for you, and why did you feel the need to respond in that way, and like where were you coming from, and sharing just in that curiosity of then teaching them to say, okay, I was feeling these ways because of this, or I was already overstimulated. Now she's gonna come put her tail in front of the camera. But why am I feeling this way? And why was that my initial response? Because physical responses are normal, but then it's also helping us teach our kids to be like, okay, these are the feelings that came up. And I wanted to respond physically in this way, but how can I see that it was okay for me to be feeling those things, but this was how to direct my action that was different? And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do for our kids in this age that we have, this was not the common way to parent. This was not how we were taught or told to parent. But when we can even break it through, even if we're not telling them, okay, we're moving through the 4 A's, even if you just have it in your brain, okay, like I'm going to ask them what was coming up for them, help them name them, help them identify that. And then tracing it to accepting why we were feeling that way. It's okay that we were feeling overstimulated because of our talking while we were already feeling unheard, or whatever that kind of was. And now, okay, how did we respond when we were feeling that way? And what are some other ways we can respond? And that way we're teaching and we're becoming that voice in our children's heads that when they have a visceral response as an adult, or one day with their own children, or even one day at work or with a friend, we are building the synapses in their brain to acknowledge and be like, okay, what's coming up, accepting that part of us, and then how are we choosing to respond? And that allows them to have that very easy kind of way to navigate, but also a really healthy way to navigate those emotions. And when it comes down to like changing behavior in your child, it comes to that kind of thing too. If you're teaching them that awareness to where then they are in control of their emotions, and we're teaching them how to handle those big feelings, we're literally setting up for success in relationships for the rest of their life.
I love that so much too, like to really set them up for success, because a lot of times, especially working with other moms or kids that just went off to college, they've had everything done for them. And then all of a sudden they're thrown in and have to like figure all this stuff out for themselves. And so the more that we can slowly teach and coach and mentor them right now to solve their own problems and to regulate themselves, the more successful they'll be once they go to college or whatever path they take moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and then it sets your foundation up with them too as a loving and safe and authentic place to communicate for when they do go out in the world and they are going to have these experiences and they're going to have these visceral responses and they're going to want to act in a certain way. And sometimes they're going to act inappropriately. We all do. We all have a little bit of toxic that comes out here and there.
I yelled my head off to get her upstairs yesterday.
Yeah, and that's totally a normal response. I mean, your physical boundaries were like while you were already dysregulated, you had a physical, attack on what you were already trying to regulate. Like that's a perfectly normal response to be like, I don't feel heard, you're disrespecting my boundaries, and I'm going to blow up at you, because that is if anybody hit somebody in the face with anything, of course you would expect to get yelled at, But, that's where like we can teach our kids, be like, okay, I was real angry, and like, oh, I'm just feeling incredibly overstimulated and I don't feel like I'm being heard. And I'm going to take a second to walk away instead of throwing a pillow at mom's head, But too, when they do then act out of character and they do act out of unalignment with their values, which they're gonna do, they're human beings, and we are gonna do that as humans and parents, that we can come back and be like, look, I realized I was out of alignment with that behavior and that was not okay on my part. But also I need you to see how your behavior was out of unalignment. And next time, how can we navigate this so that we are both making sure our needs are met, but we're also able to make sure that we are able to respond and get our feelings out there. And when you build that safe space of communication of like, hey, mom, I messed up, or you are building that rapport of like, when I mess up, my kids know I'm going to come and apologize to them and we're going to talk about it. It makes it so that when they do mess up, you are who they turn to, instead of who they try to hide their inadequacy from. And it unlocks really that authentic communication with your kids for the rest of their lives, instead of fighting as a teenager to please let me in after years of accidentally dehumanizing them. It changes the game.
I love that so much. And I love how you put that of like hiding the stuff, because that's a lot of what happens in the teenage years is they're so afraid to like show you that they did mess up. Because I mean, they're getting more freedoms, they're getting more things, and they're not in front of you as much anymore. And so they're at the age where they're going to rebel. They're going to make mistakes, and that's part of the process. But if they're afraid to come talk to you about it or use you as a sounding board, that's when we have the communication problems.
Absolutely. And when, that's been kind of if they have not ever seen you be able to live in accountability and take accountability for when you mess up, that's not going to be a skill they have. So you can't expect your teenagers to have this skill of being like, mom, I messed up and now I need your guidance. If you haven't taught them that skill of like, yeah, I'm going to mess up because I'm a human, but here's how I'm going to be accountable for when I mess up. And then when they mess up, they're going to be accountable because they've seen that skill modeled. It's all about, that mutual respect and connection of understanding that your children are full-blown humans with all individual parts too. And working together to develop all of those parts of us and identify all of those parts of us, instead of pretending like we have it together to model what that looks like for our children, when in reality, they need to see us broken. They need to see us upset. They need to see us mess up and take accountability for those actions. And I think it's just, it's okay as a parent when you're broken and you're overstimulated and you're tired and you're stressed out, like you're gonna act out of an alignment. It's gonna happen. But, I think that is one of the biggest parts of authenticity in general, is also being able to take that accountability.
Oh, I'm so with you. And we'll be back in just a moment. Do you ever feel like your own dreams are fading on you as you focus and keep everything together for your family, or been buried under laundry and school runs and endless to-do lists? They're so deep, you don't even know what they are anymore. The Mama Genius Hub is here to help you uncover that part of you again. Maybe you felt that pull to start a passion project, return to a hobby you once loved, or pursue a career that lights you up, but you're so caught in everyone else's needs that you keep slipping through the cracks. In just 15 minutes a day, our mini courses will help you reconnect with those dreams while finding a new rhythm in motherhood's beautiful, messy life. And best of all, you'll be doing it with a community of moms who truly understand the juggle and the joy. The Mama Genius Hub is a community who've been there and are here to support and inspire each other every step of the way. It's time to rediscover your spark, live in your genius, and inspire your kids by showing them how to follow their own passions. Join the Mama Genius Hub today and start creating space for you again without guilt or doing it solo. Come to www.connectingmamas.com for more details. And we're back. And I wish we had more time to talk because we could keep going, but we're going to have to run into our final question, which is, what is a common misconception about motherhood that you think holds many moms back from truly stepping into their genius?
I think the big one is that you have to be perfect, or that you're not allowed to mess up. I think, like I said, if we aren't modeling for our children that we are going to mess up as human beings, and there's not an expectation of perfection, but that you're able to be authentic in what you are dealing with and what you're going through with your children, it is going to be a game changer. And I think so many moms are so afraid, that I know I was for so long, that if I was broken, or if I did mess up, or that if I were to tell my children I'm sorry, that was somehow saying I damaged the relationship. And for me, that was something I was really worried about, in stepping into my own authenticity and becoming aware of my own emotions and triggers, was that I was so afraid that I wouldn't be able to move past them, and that then I would be aware of them and not able to understand them or come out on the other side of it, because it's so daunting to realize, and it's really hard to realize when we mess up. And so I think that's the biggest misconception, is that motherhood isn't about perfectionhood, or always responding in the best way, or always having a therapeutic response. But it's about being accountable and aware and living in our own authenticity, so we can teach our children how to do that too.
I love that so much, because so often we expect that from them to happen automatically. But if we're not teaching that or modeling it for them, it's hard for them to really hone in on what that means. And so I love that so much. On that note, we're going to put you backstage for just a moment to give some takeaways, and then we'll bring you right back for, oh wait, before we do that, tell everyone how they can get a hold of you. And if you have a free gift.
I'm on Instagram, Britt Sandoval Speaks. You can find me on my podcast, The Odd Mom Pod, which is just oddmompod.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. If somebody wants to book me for speaking, I do speaking on leadership and following the 4 A's and inclusion in a leadership setting as well, in a parenting setting. And so that's also brittsandoval.com.
Ooh, awesome. And we'll put you backstage for just a moment. Wow, so much to take away from that episode. I'll do my best to give us 5. All right. So our first one, though, is really just talking about the word humanizing. Because, I mean, sometimes we forget about that, or even what does it even mean? But really seeing that each person living is a human with the same needs, same type of thing, and really honing that and honoring that, so we're listening to each other more often. Then we're going to just dive right into takeaway number 2, which is the first 2 A's that she gave us, which is first that awareness in keeping in with where you're at and figuring out what's happening. How am I feeling right now? What's going on? And then we go into the second half is the acceptance of it. And so once you're aware, then it's working towards actually accepting that it's okay to be like that at the moment. But then that takes us to takeaway number 3, where we start to decide, is that in alignment with who I am, where I'm at right now, the values I have, or, where do I need to adjust or do things so that I am living in my authentic self and being able to respond or react, or even when you do react, that you go back, because that leads us into, that'll be takeaway number 5, that when you do react to things, that you go back and take accountability for that. But that leads us in takeaway number 4 is really, how do we model that for our kids and really help them direct that action, and helping them talk to them and communicate them about the 4 A's. Again, you don't necessarily need to use the 4 A's when you're talking to them, but in your mind, that you're going through them when you're having those conversations about their big feelings, and how to model that and navigate that. So you have that framework in your mind that you can now ask those questions to them to help them explain and understand where they're coming from. And then that leads us to number 5, which is that accountability skill. Is that we're really working towards doing that, so that we're accountable to ourselves, to the person in front of us, and that we're modeling that accountability that we want our kids to be. We want them to be accountable for the things that they're doing, but if we're not willing to be accountable and apologize and do the things to show them how to do it, it's just not going to work. So let's be that role model for each one of them. Let's bring Britt back for her final takeaway.
Hi, thanks. So my final takeaway is don't be afraid to feel your feels. It's the very first step that in any of this is finally allowing and giving yourself the humanhood to feel your emotions. And so I think that's my biggest thing. Allow yourself to feel your feels. It's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that means that you're making headway.
And yesterday I felt the feels and just announced I'm frustrated. Sometimes saying it out loud. Exactly. On that note, thanks you all for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's episode of the Mama Genius Hub podcast. If you found value in our conversation, please share this episode with another mama who might benefit. Sharing helps us build a supportive community and reach out to more mamas like you. After all, it's more fun when we do motherhood together. Until next time, stay motivated and continue to pursue your dreams as you shine in your genius.